Mom yelled. "Get out of the wedding. You've got nothing to be proud of." After I spent $25,000 on my sister's big day. 3 months later, they asked me for $50,000 to open a restaurant, but my response left them stunned. I, 28 never thought my own family would turn on me the way they did. What happened at my sister's wedding 3 months ago still burns in my chest, but what they asked me for last week. That's when I realized just how little they actually thought of me. Let me start from the beginning. I've always been the responsible one in our family. While my sister was partying through college and dropping out twice, I was working 2 jobs to pay for my engineering degree. While she was bouncing between boyfriends and career changes, I was building my consulting business from the ground up. By 28, I was finally making good money. Not rich, but comfortable enough to help family when they needed it. When my sister announced her engagement last year, Mom immediately started talking about the dream wedding she deserved. The problem was, neither my sister nor her fiancé had steady income. He worked part-time at a gym, and she was between jobs again. My parents were already stretched thin from Dad's medical bills from his heart surgery 2 years ago. That's when the hints started. Mom would mention how successful I was during family dinners, how proud they were of my business, how I was the only one who could make my sister's special day perfect. The guilt trips were subtle at first, then became more direct. My sister would tear up talking about how she'd always dreamed of a beautiful wedding but couldn't afford it. I caved. I told them I'd cover the wedding costs as my gift to her. What I thought would be maybe $10,000 turned into $25,000 real quick. The venue she wanted was expensive. The dress had to be designer. The flowers, the photographer, the band, everything had to be perfect. Every time I suggested something more budget-friendly, Mom would give me this look like I was being cheap with my own sister's happiness. I paid for everything up front. Venue deposit, catering, flowers, photography, even the honeymoon. My savings account took a serious hit, but I figured it was worth it to see my sister happy and to keep peace in the family. The wedding day arrived, and everything looked perfect. My sister looked beautiful, the venue was stunning, guests were having a great time. I felt good about what I'd done, even if it had cost me most of my emergency fund. Then came the speeches. My sister got up to thank everyone, and she went through this long list of people who had supported her. She thanked her friends for being there, her new in-laws for welcoming her, even the wedding planner for making everything perfect. She thanked Mom and Dad for their love and support. She thanked her husband's family for contributing to their future. She never mentioned me. Not once. I sat there feeling confused and hurt, but I told myself maybe she was just nervous and forgot. Maybe she'd thank me privately later. After the speeches, I was standing near the bar when I overheard my sister talking to some of her college friends. One of them was gushing about how amazing the wedding was, asking how they'd managed to afford such a beautiful celebration. My sister laughed and said her parents had really stepped up. That family always comes through when it matters. She made it sound like Mom and Dad had paid for everything. When her friend pressed for details about how they'd managed such an expensive wedding, my sister just smiled and said they'd been saving for years and had some help from relatives. Relatives. Plural. Like I was just one of many contributors instead of the person who'd paid for literally everything. I felt sick to my stomach, but I didn't want to cause a scene at her wedding. I decided to talk to her about it later, maybe the next day when things had calmed down. But things got worse before I had that chance. Later that evening, during the reception, Mom pulled me aside. I thought she was going to thank me, or at least acknowledge what I'd done. Instead, she started criticizing how I'd been acting all day. She said I looked miserable, that I was bringing down the mood with my attitude. She told me I should be happier for my sister, that this was her special day, and I was being selfish by moping around. When I tried to explain that I was hurt about not being acknowledged, she cut me off. Mom said I was being ridiculous, that I shouldn't expect praise for doing what family does for each other. She said I made good money and could afford it, so why was I acting like I deserved a medal? Then she said the words that still echo in my head. If you can't be happy for your sister, then get out of the wedding. You've got nothing to be proud of here. Nothing to be proud of. After I'd just spent $25,000 to make this day possible, I left. I didn't make a scene, didn't announce my departure, just quietly gathered my things and drove home. I spent the rest of the night staring at my bank statements, wondering how I'd become the villain in a story where I'd tried to be generous. The next few weeks were tense. My sister called once to ask why I'd left early, and when I tried to explain how hurt I was, she got defensive. She said she'd been overwhelmed and couldn't remember everyone she needed to thank. She said I was being dramatic and making her wedding about me. Mom and Dad didn't call at all. I decided to step back from family gatherings for a while. I needed space to process what had happened and figure out how to move forward. I threw myself into work, took on extra projects, started rebuilding my savings account. 3 months passed with minimal contact. A few text messages here and there, but nothing substantial. I was starting to feel like maybe I'd overreacted, like maybe I should reach out and try to repair things. Then last week, Dad called. He was friendly, asking how I was doing, how work was going. We chatted for a few minutes about normal stuff, and I started to relax. Maybe they'd realized how they'd treated me and wanted to make things right. Then he got to the real reason for his call. My sister and her husband had been talking about opening a restaurant. They'd found the perfect location, had a solid business plan, and were really excited about the opportunity. The only problem was they needed startup capital. They'd been trying to get a loan, but with their credit and employment history, banks weren't interested. Dad explained that they needed $50,000 to make their dream happen. He said they'd thought of me because I was doing so well financially, and because I'd always been supportive of family ventures. He mentioned how generous I'd been with the wedding and how much that had meant to everyone. I sat there listening, feeling this weird mix of disbelief and clarity. They'd ignored me for 3 months, never apologized for how they'd treated me, never acknowledged what I'd done for the wedding. But now they needed money again, and suddenly I was family worth calling. Dad kept talking about what a great investment it would be, how I could be a silent partner, how they'd pay me back with interest. He made it sound like they were doing me a favor by offering me this opportunity. When he finished his pitch, he asked what I thought. I told him I needed some time to think about it and would get back to him. After I hung up, I sat in my living room for about an hour, just processing everything. That's when I realized this wasn't really about the money. It was about respect. It was about being valued as more than just a bank account with legs. I called Dad back the next day. I told him I'd thought carefully about their request, and I had an answer. I said I'd be happy to contribute to their restaurant venture, but I had some conditions. First, I wanted a formal apology from both Mom and my sister for how they'd treated me at the wedding. Not a casual sorry you felt bad, but a real acknowledgement of what they'd done wrong. Second, I wanted to be properly credited for my contribution to the wedding. I didn't need a parade, but I wanted them to stop pretending Mom and Dad had paid for everything. Third, if I was going to invest in their restaurant, I wanted it to be a real business partnership with contracts, defined roles, and legal protections. Not just a family handout they could ignore when convenient. Dad went quiet for a long moment. Then he said he'd talk to Mom and my sister and get back to me. He called back 2 days later. Dad said they'd discussed my conditions, and they felt I was being unreasonable. Mom thought I was trying to hold the past over their heads and make them grovel. My sister said she shouldn't have to apologize for not giving a perfect speech at her own wedding, and that I was being petty about something that didn't matter. As for the business partnership, they said they wanted to keep it simple and didn't think contracts were necessary between family members. They trusted me, and I should trust them. Dad asked if I could reconsider my conditions and just help them out the way I'd helped with the wedding. I told him no. I explained that the wedding situation had shown me exactly how they viewed my contributions as something they were entitled to, not something to be grateful for. I said I wasn't willing to put myself in that position again. Dad got frustrated and said I was being stubborn and holding grudges. He said family should help family without conditions, and that I was making this more complicated than it needed to be. I told him that respect works both ways, and that they'd made it clear they didn't respect me or my contributions. I said I wasn't going to keep being their ATM while being treated like an afterthought. The conversation ended badly. Dad said he was disappointed in me, and that Mom was right about my attitude. That was a week ago. Since then, I've gotten several text messages from my sister, ranging from angry to pleading. She's accused me of sabotaging her dreams out of spite, then switched to begging me to reconsider because they really need this opportunity. Mom sent one text saying she was ashamed of how selfish I'd become. But here's the thing, I don't feel guilty anymore. For the first time in months, I feel like I'm standing up for myself instead of just being a doormat with a checkbook. I've been thinking a lot about family dynamics and what we owe each other. I used to think that being the successful one meant I had an obligation to help everyone else, even if they didn't appreciate it. But the wedding situation taught me that generosity without respect is just enabling. My sister and her husband are adults. If they want to open a restaurant, they can figure out how to finance it like any other entrepreneurs. They can improve their credit, save money, find investors, or start smaller and build up. What they can't do is treat me like garbage and then expect me to fund their dreams. I've started going to therapy to work through some of these family issues. My therapist has helped me understand that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. She's also helped me see that my family's reaction to my boundaries tells me everything I need to know about how they really view me. The money I would have given them for the restaurant, I'm using it to invest in my own business expansion. I'm hiring 2 new employees and upgrading our equipment. For the first time in years, I'm putting my own financial goals first instead of everyone else's. I know this situation has probably damaged my relationship with my family permanently. Part of me is sad about that, because I do love them despite everything. But I'm also relieved to be off the emotional roller coaster of trying to earn their appreciation through my wallet. My sister's restaurant dreams will have to wait, or they'll have to find another way to make them happen. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. Sometimes the most important word you can learn to say is no. It took me 28 years and $25,000 to figure that out, but I'm glad I finally did. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since I posted this, and things have gotten interesting. My sister's husband reached out to me directly, which surprised me because we've never been particularly close. He asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. I was curious about what he wanted to say without my sister or parents around, so I agreed. We met at a neutral location, and he started by apologizing. He said he'd been thinking about the wedding situation and realized how unfair it had been to me. He admitted that my sister had told him I'd paid for everything, but she'd asked him not to make a big deal about it because she was embarrassed about needing so much help. He said he'd pushed her to thank me properly during her speech, but she'd gotten nervous and forgot. He also said that when her friends asked about the wedding costs, she'd been too proud to admit her brother had paid for everything, so she'd made it sound like it was a family effort. I appreciated his honesty, but I told him that didn't excuse how Mom had treated me or how my sister had reacted when I tried to talk to her about it afterward. He nodded and said he understood why I was hurt. Then he surprised me by saying he didn't think I should give them money for the restaurant. He explained that my sister had never run a business before and didn't really understand what was involved. She'd gotten excited about the idea after watching some cooking shows and visiting a few trendy restaurants, but she hadn't done any real research or planning. The $50,000 wouldn't even be enough to properly launch the kind of place she was envisioning. He said he tried to talk her into starting smaller, maybe doing catering or a food truck first, but she wanted to go big right away. He was worried they'd burn through my money quickly and then be back asking for more. I asked him why he was telling me this, and he said he didn't want to see me get hurt again. He also admitted that he was having second thoughts about the whole restaurant idea, but didn't know how to tell my sister without crushing her dreams. We talked for about an hour, and I found myself actually liking him more than I ever had before. He seemed genuinely concerned about both my feelings and my sister's unrealistic expectations. When I got home, I felt conflicted. Part of me was glad to have confirmation that I'd made the right choice about the money, but part of me felt bad for my sister, knowing that her husband was having doubts about their shared dream. Update 2. 3 days after my coffee meeting with my brother-in-law, my sister showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked like she'd been crying, and she asked if we could talk. I let her in, and she immediately started apologizing. She said she'd been thinking about the wedding and realized how badly she'd handled everything. She admitted that she'd been embarrassed about needing so much financial help and had tried to downplay my contribution to save face with her friends. She said she knew that was wrong and that she should have thanked me publicly and properly. She also apologized for getting defensive when I tried to talk to her about it afterward. I told her I appreciated the apology, but I was still hurt by how the whole family had reacted when I tried to express my feelings. That's when she told me something that surprised me. She said Mom had been upset about the wedding costs from the beginning and had taken out her stress on me. Apparently, Mom had been worried about me spending so much money and had felt guilty about not being able to contribute more herself. According to my sister, Mom's harsh words at the wedding had come from a place of guilt and frustration, not because she didn't appreciate what I'd done. She said Mom had been too proud to apologize directly, but had been feeling terrible about it for months. I asked my sister why she was telling me this now, and she admitted that her husband had talked to her after our coffee meeting. He'd told her that he thought she owed me a real apology and that the restaurant idea wasn't as solid as she believed. She said they decided to put the restaurant plans on hold and focus on building up their savings and experience first. She wasn't asking for money anymore. She just wanted to try to repair our relationship. We talked for a long time that afternoon. It wasn't a magical fix-everything conversation, but it felt like the first honest discussion we'd had in years. She acknowledged that she'd taken my generosity for granted and that she needed to be more appreciative of what I'd done for her. I told her that I loved her, but that I needed to see consistent changes in how the family treated me, not just apologies when they needed something. She said she understood and that she was going to talk to Mom about apologizing to me properly. Update 3. Mom called me yesterday. It was awkward at first. We haven't really talked since the wedding disaster 3 months ago. She started by saying she'd been talking to my sister and realized she owed me an apology. She said she'd been stressed about money and family dynamics for a long time, and she'd taken it out on me unfairly. Mom explained that she'd felt guilty about not being able to pay for my sister's wedding herself, and seeing me step up had made her feel like a failure as a mother. She said she'd been defensive and had lashed out at me because she was embarrassed about the situation. She admitted that telling me I had nothing to be proud of was cruel and completely wrong. She said she'd been proud of me for being generous with my sister, but she'd been too caught up in her own feelings to express that properly. Mom also said she understood why I'd said no to the restaurant investment, and that she respected my decision to set boundaries with the family. It wasn't a perfect conversation, but it felt genuine. She didn't make excuses for her behavior, and she didn't try to guilt me into changing my mind about the money. I told her that I appreciated the apology and that I wanted to work on rebuilding our relationship, but that things needed to be different going forward. I said I was tired of being seen as the family bank account and wanted to be valued for more than just my financial contributions. She agreed and said she'd been thinking about family dynamics a lot lately. She admitted that they'd all gotten too comfortable expecting me to solve financial problems, and that wasn't fair to me. We're planning to have dinner next week, just the two of us, to continue working through things. As for my sister and her husband, they've started looking into culinary school and restaurant management courses. They're approaching their dream more realistically now, which I respect. I still don't regret saying no to the $50,000 request. That decision forced everyone to confront how they'd been treating me and led to these more honest conversations. Sometimes you have to be willing to disappoint people to get them to see you clearly. My relationship with my family isn't completely healed, but it feels like we're moving in a better direction. And most importantly, I feel like I'm finally being seen as a person worth respecting, not just a wallet worth accessing. The therapy has been helping a lot too. I'm learning to recognize my own worth and to maintain boundaries even when it's uncomfortable. It's been one of the best investments I've ever made.